Then let's continue with the next speaker. So we're very happy to have with us Benjamin Wong, who is the Director of Public Affairs and Sustainability at LONGi, the world's biggest solar companies, even more when you look about vertical and horizontal integration. And we're happy to have Benjamin share with us LONGi's ESG and traceability initiatives that enable customer success. Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Okay. I'll spend the next 20 minutes just sharing with you LONGi's approach to ESG and traceability. These ESG and traceability initiatives are always geared towards our customer successes because let's start a little bit about LONGi. Since 2012, LONGi has manufactured almost 414 gigawatts of PV products. And the numbers here you see are our year 2023 financial data, and which has been reported in our 2023 financial report. I have put them into sterling pounds. So let's just move on to the next slide at the moment. Okay. Now we looked about LONGi here in terms of financial performance, but more importantly, also we need to look at how financially sustainable our operations is. LONGi has a 13.3 billion sterling pounds worth in assets and 920 million sterling pounds in cash flow. More importantly, in Bloomberg as well as PV Module Tech, we have always been rated excellent in high Armanzi score, as well as AAA in PV Module Tech Banker rating, I believe, for the last, 12 quarters or more or so. Okay, so next slide. Now I'm going to jump from financial sustainability into our ESG and sustainable operations, but that has to be underpinned with why, and the why is very region specific. I'm responsible for Europe, so I'm going to look today, and today's presentation is going to be mostly geared towards Europe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ESG reporting obligations and regulations in Europe right now. The three key items right now in terms of EU-wide, European Commission-wide obliging requirements is essentially the CSRD, the CSDDD, as well as the ban on forced labor regulation, which let's call this the FLR at the moment. All these three requires reporting into environmental, social, governance, and the FLR will very likely touch on traceability requirements. It is not clear on exactly what the FLR requires yet because the guidelines has not been published, but we will expect this to definitely include traceability of the supply chain as well as due diligence of suppliers within the supply chain, whether or not wherever they may be located in. The CS3D itself reporting guidelines is has been clarified, and this is the ESRS guidance at the moment. So what we need to do is first, certainly LONGi would have to be compliant, but LONGi itself as a Chinese company is not obliged for reporting until 2026, 2017 at least. Okay. However, our customers itself have an obligation to report already in a 2025 financial year itself. So we have to be ready and to ensure that we have the information and data for our customers reporting. Next slide, please, Michael. Thank you. So LONGi's structured our ESG reporting based on the United Nations SDG goals. These goals, let's just call it as the first base layer itself, gives a sense of the international requirements in terms of ESG. And they also creates a framework for reporting as well as for as well as internationally recognized worldwide. So our annual report itself and a sustainability report, as well as a climate report itself, all uses the UN SDG goals and the principles contained within it in its reporting. Next slide, please. Thank you. If you look into LONGi's commitment itself, the way we structured our sustainability commitment is first is based on the acronym LIGHT, LIGHT. L for leading, I for innovative products, G for green climate action, H for harmonious employee well-being and industrial cooperation, and T finally for trustworthiness, which is a part of governance. And we build this entire sustainability framework based on LIGHT, and the sustainability governance is right now being headed by a chief sustainability officer who has just joined us in 2024. Next slide. Hang on. So now coming into the reporting itself, LONGi publishes 2 reports every year. The latest sustainability report was published in 2023. It was released in May 2023, and we also published a climate action white paper, which is released during the COP. The differences between these two is that the sustainability report itself covers all areas of ESG, and the climate report does a deep dive into the actual numbers. Okay, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 in particular. These numbers are critical because LONGi scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions becomes our customer scope 3 emissions. And our customers are certainly are looking to reduce their scope 3 emissions based on CSRD and also based on their internal sustainability standards that they own set. We report based on internationally recognized information disclosure standards. For example, the GRI standard is used in the sustainability report and IFRS. And we join the sustainable initiatives and organizations. You can see that the SDG is there, the science-based targets, which reports under the SBTi. The climate group, EV100, EP100, and RE100, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this itself gives all this taken together gives a comprehensive and structured framework for reporting ESG as well as traceability standards. Next slide, please. Thank you. We embarked on this journey maybe 5-6 years ago, okay, when LONGi launched the Solar for Solar concept. And you can see the results coming back in terms. These are 2022 numbers, but it can be updated 2023. Similarly, you see in 2022, we have Forbes, recognized by Forbes, Fortune China, Corporate Knights, as well as Bloomberg Green and Gold Pioneer Awards itself. EcoVadis assessment is a desktop assessment that checks for ESG and sustainable procurement. LONGi is among the highest rated PV companies in the world itself, with a score of 69 points, okay, in the 91st percentile. The 91st percentile is not only limited to PV, it's limited to all companies that has been assessed in EcoVadis. Most importantly, we look into benchmarking, also with what our industry peers are doing, but more importantly, we want to look into the best in class in the world. One of the companies that we benchmark against is Apple. And why did we choose Apple? You ask, it's quite different, like LONGi. Simply because LONGi and Apple are both in the semiconductors sector. So therefore, there is a string that ties both of us together, both companies together. And therefore, we look into Apple's best practice sustainability practices, and we benchmark against them too. And we can see this back to back. Right now, we are of course still behind them, but we have a standard to look to and a standard that we want to reach in the semiconductor industry. Next slide. Moving on into products and services, which is essentially the I part of the light framework. I just want to mention simply that LONGi continuously increase R&D investments to safeguard innovation. Solar is a industry that is built on continuous innovation. We really saw this moving from polycrystalline to monocrystalline, and now into new technologies like TOPCon as well as back contact already. LONGi in 2023 invested 5.96% of our revenue into R&D. Okay, a year-on-year increase of 8%, and is within the industry highest itself. We have also invested in intelligent manufacturing, and our LONGi Jiangxing factory has been selected as the global lighthouse factory by the World Economic Forum. This is the only lighthouse factory in the global PV industry right now. And I do welcome some of our customers to come visit that factory itself. More importantly, these innovations go into developing low carbon products. Okay, and these low carbon products has to be certified from France, from Korea, from Italy, for example, EPD, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Thank you. I talked a little bit about creating low carbon products, and there is a life cycle carbon reduction initiative that LONGi follows, that to develop this, starting from product design to supply of material, looking into packaging and transportation and recycling and use. You see this back in the carbon footprint certification, in particular EPD, environmental product declaration itself. Okay, the EPD is an end-to-end life cycle carbon report itself that looks into from all the way from the raw materials, from the silicon to glass to junction boxes to frame, and all the way down to packaging, transportation, operations, as well as recycling. And all these numbers itself are available in the EPD, okay, which our customers can use to determine the emissions level of the products they purchase from LONGi. This is important because we are moving from two parts of emission, one part which is the product itself, and the other side is Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, which is the company side of the emissions, and both of which have to be reported in the CSRD reporting requirements. Next slide, thank you. Okay, I talked a little bit about this already, so I would just skip this by. The Jiangxing factory is recognized as the global lighthouse factory by the World Economic Forum in December 2023. And next slide, thank you. Now, jumping from products itself towards the environment. Okay, LONGi is investing in reducing our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission itself. Scope 1 and Scope 2 is within our control. Particularly in Scope 1, we are moving towards RE100 targets of 100% use of renewable energy by 2028. Okay. More importantly, I want to say that we are on track to reach this target already, 70% by 2027 and 100% by 2028. Our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 near-term targets has been validated by the SBTi, the Science-Based Targets, and we have been one of the first Chinese company to have these targets validated. Next slide, thank you. Looking into some of these clean numbers itself, where are we? Today, we are using 47.18% of operations in renewable energy at the moment. Okay. How has this been done? Only 2.1% is self-generated on-site by distributed generation, simply because a rooftop in the factory simply is not sufficient to supply the tremendous energy demands required in a modern silicon production factory. So 97.86% is actually purchased in the power trading market itself. And like I mentioned, we are already on track for 70% by 2027, 100% by 2028. Outside of RE100, we also committed EP100 as well EV100 of the climate group targets, and this is being reported yearly to them. I mentioned SBTi. Okay, our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 has been validated by them. Our commitments are scope 1 and scope 2 reduction by 60% in 2023 from 2020, and to reduce scope 3 emissions by 52% per ton of purchased material by 2023. Again, this has been validated. These are short-term targets. If you look into some of the numbers itself, you can see where the work needs to be done. Scope 1 and scope 2 only accounts for probably about 11-12% of our total emissions in 2023. Our work to be done is in scope 3. Okay, so more than just looking at ourselves in increasing the use of renewable energies, we have to work with our suppliers for them to reduce their own carbon emissions to meet these targets itself. And this is the challenge. The scope 3 is the challenge, and we are actively working towards this. Why do we do this? Again, we come back to this. All this added together, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 becomes our customer's scope 3. And our customers, is looking for us to reduce it by maybe 50, maybe 60% itself. Next slide, thank you. We have already achieved a LONGi zero carbon plan. And this target was to complete this by 2024. I believe it's been in the process of being validated by BSI right now. Next slide. Looking at people and community, I won't spend so much time on this one here. I want to say that we have always focused on public welfare as well as a fair and harmonious working environment for our employees itself. Next slide. But more importantly, looking into the social part of ESG itself and what the customer expects of us, okay, is protecting labor rights and having an ethical workplace within LONGi. Now, LONGi is in an advantageous position because we are a vertically integrated company. We produce modules, cells, wafers, and ingots, 4 parts of the polysilicon supply chain itself. Because we do this, we can apply one singular business code of conduct, okay, and ensure compliance against all these 4 tiers of the polysilicon supply stream. LONGi's business code of conduct is aligned to United Nations UNGP, as well as the International Labour Organization ILO, as well as the OECD guidelines. Okay, taken together, this forms a internationally recognized set of human rights principles. And our code of conduct is published, is available online for our customers and for all stakeholders to review. And they can always compare this back to the UNGP, the ILO, and OECD for compliance. Next slide, thank you. LONGi also continues to champion openness, inclusion, and equality in age, region, and gender itself. I believe LONGi has one of the highest representation of female in executive management in 20.27% in 2023. I've been told by some of my colleagues itself, this is among the highest within the industry. Next slide. But I want to mention this. There's one point of saying that let's do this. Okay, let's align our data from ILO, UNGP, and OECD. Okay, and the other is to making sure that we are walking the talk itself. To do so, we use third-party certifications on ourselves to ensure that our ESG execution is consistent. This again is very important coming back to the customers, because it proves that we are not afraid to be accessed by third party. Okay, LONGi has been certified for ISO 26000 for social responsibility assessment, which basically means our systems itself to detect social responsibility are all in place and robust. Going beyond that, we also do an SA8000 social accountability certification. We have done so for 7 factories itself already, and we're going to continue to build upon this. And this itself is a on-site audit where SGS and STS and third-party auditors actually will go on-site to LONGi's factories for about a few days itself and interviews the workers and check the systems, as well as check our health and safety measures in there. It is very, very comprehensive, very, very demanding. And also it has to be renewed twice a year. So far, we have conducted 7 of these audits at 7 factories, and we're continuing to do this. And most recently, we have received the ISO 20400 certificate for sustainable procurement. Taken together, okay, this validates that our ESG execution are in place and consistent to international standards. Next slide. Let's look at moving from LONGi into supply chain itself, okay? And I'm going to wrap this up very quickly. So on the supply chain itself, 100% of our suppliers have signed the supplier code of conduct, and 100% of new suppliers are screened on social and environmental standards. This is important because our supplier code of conduct mirrors that of LONGi and also follows the UNGP, IRO, and OECD standards. And next slide. I won't go through this itself. We promote sustainable supply chain. We work with all our suppliers to carry out green certifications, as well as work on their emissions, because they are our scope 3. We need to reduce the scope 3 itself. And going down. Next slide. More importantly, looking forward to 2024 to 2028, we have built a roadmap for suppliers. First, currently 2023 are working 55%. Our suppliers that represent 55% of our revenue itself, okay, in terms of ESG and sustainability. By 2028, this will reach 80% itself. If you move on next slide. I won't talk about this much. We have a 3-step risk monitoring for suppliers. 1, we do this online for all our suppliers. And then second, we do an on-site audit, which is a second-party audit. LONGi will go in there and audit our suppliers on this compliance to the CSR code of conduct. And finally, for some policy suppliers and all, we conduct third-party ESG and traceability audit using SGS. Next slide. So I think finally I want to close by saying with my colleague here, Alexia, that we are very proud of the work we have done for the Solar Stewardship Initiative for the ESG standard. And LONGi recognizes that the industry requires a standard audit protocol for both ESG and traceability right now. Even you look at the SA8000, SA8000 only covers the S of the ESG. There isn't a singular protocol that covers all E, S, and G, and also traceability. So LONGi is one of the sponsors of the pilot SSI. We have completed the pilot audit, and right now we are engaging with our Alexia's team on joining the new SSI code. And I'm happy to say that we are ready to sign this very likely in the next few weeks, by the first few weeks of September. Right now, it is in the final process of internal assessment at the moment. Upon joining, LONGi would be obligated, and we will conduct the required 2 audits by 2025 for both the ESG and traceability modules. As you may know, the ESG module for the SSI code is ready, but the traceability module itself is right now in public consultation. We believe it'll be ready by 2025, whereupon we can start upon the audits. However, in the meantime, our supply chain has already been audited by STS as well as SGS and Kiwa PI Berlin right now. Okay, and we look forward to working with on the SSI code itself to strengthen these audits into with an industry recognized standard. Next slide. I think this should be the last slide. If you think, let's skip this here. Let's just say that we have a partnership with Fellow Group that provides silicon from outside of the China supply stream if our customer requires so. Next slide. And I close this presentation. Thank you very much, and apologies for running out of time. I didn't have my clock next to me, Michael.
No problem. Thanks, Benjamin. Very insightful, very comprehensive. I think we skipped the question and then keep that for later when we have the panel.
Of course. Thank
you. If there
you.
are any questions in the chat, please respond.
I saw it in the chat, the PFS, FS. Yes, let's come back to that later in the discussion.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you.